So I found a problem with the solution that I had previously. Unfortunately, the having it based on the number of tail segments actually causes the you win screen to pop up too early. Here, look. And this is how it is supposed to look. Collect the last fruit, they all tally up, there's a brief delay, and then it shows up. So the reason why this was happening, so I've recreated the bug and I've paused the game right as it happens. So the zone cleared message is fading in, and as you can see, there's still a lot of gems still waiting to be tallied up. So the reason why this happened is because the code is checking for how many tail segments are left remaining and not how many gems are currently waiting to be tallied. And so if you have a really long tail, the tail gets turned into gems, they start flying up, and then as soon as one of them collides with the points display to be tallied up, it checks to see how long the fruit crawler's tail is. It sees that there is no fruit crawler anymore and is like, oh, okay, so the score tally must be finished, even though there's a bunch of gems still in flight. So, stepping forward, you can see that, yeah. It is very much bugged. So to fix this, I got rid of the tail segments runtime set because it's not actually needed anymore. And I created a gem count scriptable object variable. This is a scriptable object which in this case has a single field, an int or an integer, and that way you can share that data across different scripts in the game without depending on objects. You can depend on this single asset. It's the same concept as I discussed with runtime scripts. Again, this is a system that was designed by Ryan Hipple. I recommend watching the Unity talk on Unity architecture with scriptable objects for further details. Very useful. At any rate, so I created a gem count, and this just stores a single integer, which is the number of gems that are currently in the game. And then I also removed the gem collected event, because none of the code is actually using the event, or none of the code is currently checking to see if a particular gem has been collected yet or not. It only cares if all of the gems have been collected. So it makes more sense to have an all gems collected event instead. So I did both of those things. So inside of one of the scripts that handles the win state, when the tail starts being turned into gems, it resets the gem count to 0. And then when one of the tail segments is turned into a gem, it increments the gem count. And then when a gem is collected, it decrements the count and then checks to see if the count is 0. And if it is, then it invokes the all gems collected event. By the way, looking through this code, I'm realizing that I probably should have put the gem increment over here in the gem script. That way, the same script is incrementing it and decrementing it. That would be a little bit cleaner, but oh well. That's a task for the future if I have time. At any rate, so that's how that works. The game manager listens for the all gems collected event, starts the coroutine to finish the score tally, which waits for 200 milliseconds, and this here works the same as it did previously, with the exception that I actually moved the zone cleared UI to open up that screen. That has now been properly moved into Canvas script. So Canvas script listens for the on-score tally finished event. As long as you're not on the final level, it opens up the zone cleared UI. The reason why it checks for this is because if you're on the final level, then it needs to open up the, it needs to show the you won the game screen, you know, and all the extra stuff that goes on with that. So that's why it has the check here. But as long as you're not on the last level, it opens up the zone cleared screen and we're good. And it all works. Thank goodness. I don't know why that's going so fast. It definitely shouldn't be, though. Oh no, I have another bug to fix. I don't even know what could have caused that. I didn't change anything. I just rebooted the editor. Alright, well... yeah, that's still concerning, but I doubt there's anything I can do to fix it now. So that is not supposed to happen. Oh, spoiler alert in case you haven't finished the game yet, but yeah, that's not supposed to happen. The zone cleared message and the you win screen are both being displayed on top of each other. I am going to have to fix that. So after some digging, I discovered where the problem is. So this code should be correct. However, level index, which should be pointing to a scriptable object variable that stores an integer whose value is the current level index, this should be a reference to that scriptable object asset. Unfortunately, it is an int reference, not an int variable, and that is very important. The reason for that I'll show you here in a second. So the difference between a reference and a variable is that a reference allows you to choose whether or not it's backed by a scriptable object variable or an immediate value. An immediate value basically turns it in, instead of being a scriptable object reference, it acts as though a normal field. So it defaults to an immediate value, and so instead of storing the current level index, it is always 0. So that guard clause was not actually checking the correct value. It was always checking against 0. This needs to be set to variable, and it needs to be set to level index. This is the asset that stores it, and now it should work. Oh, missed it. There we go. The zone cleared message is no longer being displayed at the same time. So that is one reason why I personally have been moving away from using scriptable object like the reference type, except for in the early days of prototyping when you might want that flexibility. Later in development, it actually becomes a problem because you can't check for errors like that very easily. So, yeah, I've been moving away from using those later in a project's development cycle, which is probably how they're intended to be used anyways. So I'm currently extracting, or like decoupling, the points display from the game manager, and this just happened. That's not what it's supposed to look like. I'm pretty sure this is happening because I believe this is implicitly calling toString. So to fix it, I have to specify the value directly. Yep, that fixed it. The game manager finally no longer has any dependencies on any of the UI elements in the canvas. To check that, drag the canvas into another scene, and there are no warnings about cross-scene references. Whew, it worked. Okay, now I need to create a game UI specific scene, which stores the all the user interface stuff in it. So that way the UI and the game objects are completely separated. Alright, the next thing I need to do is take all of these individual user interface screens, and I need to create prefabs out of them. Something else I want to do is split the background element out and make it its own object. And I also want each of these screens to have its own canvas. And yeah, that's what I'm doing next. So all of the, well, most of the user interface elements are now in prefabs, and each one of them also has its own canvas component. And the reason for that is I believe the way Unity's UI works is that each canvas gets rendered out to its own texture, and then the whole interface is composited together from individual canvas textures. It seems to make sense that if anything changes in the UI hierarchy, such as a message appearing and disappearing, that sort of thing, pause menu appearing and closing, that these should probably be on separate canvases so that they're stored on their own textures, and Unity won't have to update them constantly. I ran into a problem while doing this, though. So while I was figuring this out, I was also removing graphic raycasters from components that don't need it. So for example, saving progress, this just displays a saving progress notification at the bottom of your screen. So you don't actually need a graphic raycaster for it because you don't need to interact with it with the mouse. However, my thinking was, okay, the canvas, the root canvas, doesn't actually have any UI elements directly under it. Everything has its own canvas on it. So, why does the root canvas have a graphic raycaster? We can just remove that, right? Like this. Apparently that causes a bug. Which took me a little while to figure out that this is what was causing it. Let me show you what happens if I run the game without a graphic raycaster on the root canvas. So to demonstrate this, I'll open up, or I'll cause to appear the zone cleared message. So normally, this user interface has a transparent black background back here, which normally makes it so that you cannot open up the menu. However, watch this. You can still click through it. However, you cannot click through the text, or well, this is one big image actually. It's not actual text, but you can't click through this image, but you can still click through the background. Very bizarre, and I don't know exactly why this is happening, but putting the graphic raycaster back on the root canvas solves it. So let me go do that real quick and show you. So the root canvas is selected. Let's go down here. Let's add a graphic raycaster. Let's organize it just for the fun of it. Organization doesn't actually affect the results though. All right, let's save the scene and see what happens now. All right, let's collect the last fruit. Zone cleared appears. And you can no longer click through the black background. So that is very interesting. I'm glad I found what was causing the problem. A bit unintuitive. Hopefully that helps someone else. Apparently, if you have nested canvases, the root canvas needs to have a graphic raycaster on it. So I've turned all of the UI screens into different prefabs. However, there is a bit of a problem. Most of these are all decoupled properly. However, these top three, Game UI, pause menu, and settings window are not decoupled from the rest of the user interface. For example, in Game UI, if we go over here to overrides, there's an override because the menu button, this thing here, is accessing the canvas script in order to open the menu, and that's the root canvas object right up here. The pause menu has a lot more overrides. The return to game button accesses the canvas for the same, similar reason. And the restart level button accesses the canvas as well. The settings button actually accesses the canvas, and then it also controls the settings screen directly. So like there's extra tangling happening with the pause menu. This isn't good because, again, the goal is to make this modular so that I can reuse these systems in our current prototypes. So I need to decouple these properly. Some of these will be easy to do because the dependencies are on canvas, and the only reason why they depend on canvas is because the big canvas script is on the root canvas object. A lot of the things it's depending on inside of the script can be moved into another script, which is just on the UI element directly. So for example, Game UI is depending on canvas because that's where the open menu button is. But the open menu button can just be on a script on Game UI. That shouldn't be a problem because open menu is only used by the Game UI itself. Let me show you what this looks like in the code. So this is the canvas script, the one that's on the root canvas object. And this bit of code here is particularly tangled up. So this code is managing opening the pause menu, closing the pause menu, and also closing the settings window based on the escape key being pressed. These functions really shouldn't be in here. So the way that this should probably operate is the game UI should be checking for the escape button to be pressed to open up the pause menu. That's fair. That's its responsibility. However, once the pause menu has been opened, it should no longer be the game user interface's responsibility to close the pause menu. That is now the pause menu's responsibility. So this code should be moved into a script on the pause menu itself. Similarly, with closing the settings window, this should not be the responsibility of the pause menu or the, well, I mean, technically it's a sub menu of the pause menu, but at any rate, of the pause menu or the game UI. Closing the settings window is the responsibility of the settings window. So this should be moved into a script on the settings window. This seems like a pretty good place to start in decoupling them. So I'm going to get these split up into separate scripts, and then we'll see what needs to be taken care of after that. One step at a time. Otherwise, this can get very messy. I've tried attacking this from several different angles. My most recent attempt was to start by moving the code for opening the pause menu when the escape key is pressed, moving that into its own script called Game UI, and it's on the Game UI canvas object. So it checks to see if the escape button is down and just makes sure that the menus aren't open already and a scene switch isn't in progress, and then opens the menu, setting the object to active, time scale to 0. This still creates a dependency on the menu game object, but my plan was to split that out later once I got this working. Unfortunately, this does not work. And the reason, well, let me explain what happens first. And you can't really see it because it happens too quickly, so I'll just explain here. When you press escape, the pause menu opens and then immediately closes, and from the player's perspective, it doesn't open at all because it happens, I think, within the same frame. So, and the reason why that's happening is because update gets called here, opens the menu, and then by pure chance, the canvas script update method then gets called and then closes the menu. I'm using get button down. The problem is that this all happens within one frame. So get button down doesn't get reset, and there's no way to mark this as being consumed. So they're both eligible to use the action. There's some different ways I could avoid this from being happened. I could have like a Boolean or something. I'd rather not introduce additional elements. What I'm going to have to do instead, I think, is tackle closing the menu first. I believe that has to be the direction I start with. I'll get the close menu action extracted out and contained within the pause menu on its own script, and then once that functions, then I can extract, like, redo this code again. I'm just going to scrap all of this and start over because like this code isn't that complicated. I could redo it easily. And it'll be less confusing, less messy to start from a clean slate. Now, on that note, I've been trying to figure out the best way to close the pause menu when the escape key is pressed. I don't work with the Unity UI very much, so I wasn't entirely sure how to go about this. I believe what the proper method is to use a cancel event, which the Unity event system already has assigned to the escape key. I believe I can listen for the cancel event and then use that to close the menu. And it's possible that the cancel event, the event system is already making sure this sort of thing can't happen. Maybe? I'm not sure, but I'm gonna give it a try. Oh, here we go. Well, I just found out that this is going to be more complicated than I was expecting. So apparently, the cancel event doesn't quite work the way you would expect. Different UI elements can consume the cancel event, and it doesn't actually make it back to the menu itself. The cancel event will also only be sent to individual buttons or elements that are currently selected. You can manually propagate it up the hierarchy using a custom event system or input module. Unfortunately, different objects in the hierarchy will still consume that cancel event and stop propagation, even if the object has not actually used the event. Apparently, this is a known problem, and there are a lot of discussions about ways to solve it. So this is going to just require a lot of research and experimentation. Very unexpected. Here we go. So I've hit an additional snag. The way to get a cancel event or like any event bubbled up or propagated up through the hierarchy is to manually tell it to propagate up on each UI element that could capture that event. Unfortunately, the event is originally only sent to the currently selected object. So if there are no user interface elements currently selected, the event just fizzles, and the code is not given any opportunity to bubble it up because the event is never sent. That is a bit unfortunate. I double-checked through the code. As far as I can tell, there's no way to change this behavior without writing your own input module. I also double-checked Rewired, which is a tool that we use for gamepad support, and it has the exact same behavior, which is probably good in the case of Rewired because it operates the way that you would expect, like the default, the built-in component from Unity. However, it is a behavior that is going to make this more difficult. So I need to find a way to handle canceling out of the pause menus without messing with any of the existing objects trying to process that cancel event. Yeah, I'm not sure how I'm going to fix this. This is going to require a bit of thinking.